Hey everybody, welcome back to Let's Talk, and this is the weekly Q&A show, and I'll be your host, John, and this is the show where I answer all of your burning questions. I don't like to waste any time up top, so we just dive right into it. Our first question is going to be from Wolf Viking. We're going to answer a few of his questions because he is getting off of YouTube at the beginning of 2025, and this is the last Q&A show of 2024, so I'm hoping you at least watch next week's show, buddy. I know you decided to get off of YouTube, but he's asked a few questions we're going to answer this week, and I figured, hey, this is a physical media channel first, and his question was, okay, I got another question for you. Kickboxer 4K or the Demolition Man 4K? So I actually happen to have both of those 4K Blu-rays right here. Kickboxer will have a 4K Blu-ray review here on the channel this upcoming Tuesday. I just picked this up. I'm not the biggest Kickboxer fan, but sometimes a piece of art comes along and it just catches my eye, and I break one of my golden rules, which is don't buy a 4K Blu-ray based on box art. And, you know, I kind of wanted to rewatch Kickboxer, just a Jean-Claude Van Damme film. Jean-Claude Van Damme, not one of our great actors. Some people will argue, you know, like movies like JCVD, where it's like, okay, he's giving a good performance, but the guy is not the greatest when it comes to dialogue. Hell of a fighter, though, and this is, you know, right in his wheelhouse, Kickboxer. A combination of a bunch of different... I don't want to spoil the review, but I really did kind of enjoy this movie, despite the fact that the acting is not that great in it, and it's pretty badly edited. And when you compare that to, a movie that came out 4 years after it, Demolition Man, starring Sylvester Stallone and Wesley Snipes, I think the edge as far as the film goes to the Demolition Man. So I think if it was up to me just right out of the gate, the better film is Demolition Man. Now, as far as the 4K video quality goes, I would actually give the edge to Kickboxer in that category. Same thing with the audio. So as far as all the audio and video quality, I actually think that Kickboxer nailed it. It's also a 3-disc set compared to Arrow Video's release of Demolition Man, which is only a 1-disc set, and it doesn't have the Blu-ray packed in there, given you can buy the Blu-ray or the 4K Blu-ray version, and they're about the same price at $35. It's just that this 4K Steelbook, as far as the artwork goes, like this lenticular slip cover over the Steelbook, you guys have heard me go on and on and on about what they did with the Running Man 4K Blu-ray, putting the slip cover over the Steelbook. Well, Lionsgate doubled down on that, and they gave us this with a lenticular slipcover over a steelbook. So I was just like, okay, if I'm going to rewatch Kickboxer, I'm going to do it this way. And I'm really glad I picked it up. So it's going to come down to, how do you feel? Because for me, even though I do think the better 4K Blu-ray overall is Kickboxer, I just feel like Demolition Man is the better film. One, I'll be revisiting this 4K Blu-ray much, much more often than I will be revisiting Kickboxer. But if you like both films equally, then definitely go with the Kickboxer 4K Blu-ray. And again, I'll have that review out on Tuesday. And that was a good question, Mr. Wolf Viking. And the next question, we'll go into a film question, is from Deranged Psychopath. And he said, what is your opinion of the movie CRUST? I had never even heard of CRUST until you asked me this question, so I went and looked it up. It's a 2024 drama comedy movie. The movie stars and is directed by Sean Whalen, who you might have seen in other movies. I recognize the face, and then I looked up his filmography, and the only movie I really recognized him really specifically from was Men in Black. So I guess this guy's been like a struggling actor his entire life, and he made this little indie film featuring some other actors in it who, one of them I thought was dead, the one guy from The Fugitives in this movie. I was pretty surprised to see him in it. And also who pops up in this movie is Alan Ruck, so that was pretty funny in a small little role. But the movie takes place just at a laundromat. This guy was a child star in a pretty big show back in the day, and he's like one of the only surviving cast members. The rest of them have like died of drug overdoses. You know, this movie is a complete satire, and I loved it. I really thought that they found a good balance here as far as the satire goes. You know, some of the roles are being played over the top purposely, and you know, some of the stuff in here, the acting might not be the greatest from everybody, but overall as a film goes, I really did enjoy it. And that's just because you actually do care about the plot of the movie, and people are actually giving really good performances in it. And like I said, the guy plays a former child star who's now just managing a laundromat with a buddy of his who's also struggling in his own personal life. His wife had passed away, and now he's an alcoholic, so he's struggling with that. The main character, that struggling child star, you know, now he has a really deep depression with his life, and he's struggling very hard with this. You know, his girlfriend just leaves him at the beginning of the movie. They want to bring back the show because he's one of the only surviving members. This could be a big break for him, you know, maybe get him out of his rut. And then this movie takes a real hard left turn. And you'll either be on board or you won't be when it gets to this point, because the way this guy rises back to fame is he gets caught jacking off and somebody videotapes him, and then they upload it and like, oh, that child star you guys are looking for? Well, here he is, and look what he's doing. And, because he works at a laundromat, we always hear about, losing one sock. Well, he takes all those socks, and of course, he kind of he jacks off into him, and then he throws them in behind him. And it ends up creating this big sock monster called CRUST. You can guess why it's called CRUST. And it's kind of like a safety blanket for him. It's taking care of all the people who have screwed him over and kind of, and protecting him from that. I don't want to spoil too much more than that, but that's why the movie's called CRUST. And again, it's a satire. And okay, you guys hear me explaining this movie, and it sounds ridiculous. And at parts, it really is ridiculous and over the top, but they make sure to let you know with some of these performances. Like, think of RoboCop and how they this had to come right out of RoboCop, how they have the fake news broadcast, and they're playing it just over the top. Now, this is a little bit more over the top than that, but you can still recognize that this is a satire. And the emotional moments for this movie really do work, and the way they deal with depression really does work. So again, it might sound like a ridiculous premise for a movie, but the way everyone gives their performances and the way the actual story plays out. Now, the biggest flaw with this movie, in my opinion, is the ending. I didn't love the ending of the movie. So obviously I'm not going to spoil the ending for you guys, but I personally did not like the choice at the very end of the movie. But overall, as the film goes, I think you guys would really enjoy CRUST. I definitely can recommend that one. I don't know if it ever had a theatrical run, but you can definitely rent that movie right now on Apple or Amazon, I believe. So definitely check that one out. And the next question is from Lorenzo Harris, man of God. And he said, top 5 New Year's themed films. So there really aren't too many movies that revolve around the holiday of New Year's. New Year's is coming up right around the corner. We're all getting excited about 2025 and what 4K Blu-rays will be coming that year. But, there aren't too many movies that really revolve around the holiday. In fact, most movies that have New Year's Eve in it or New Year's Day in it really is just kind of like a passing scene. It does not really revolve around the holiday. And it's funny enough, on New Year's Eve, the 2 movies I like to watch every single year, it's kind of a tradition. My wife will fall asleep sometime through the first movie, is I like to watch the 2 Father of the Bride movies, a nice little back-to-back, even though they have nothing to do with New Year's. The first movie, though, takes place in the winter. It's one of the first times it snows in California in that movie. It's pretty funny how they bring that up. So it always kind of felt like a New Year's movie just in the sense of tone, even though, again, nothing to do with New Year's. But I always enjoyed watching those movies. I think they're a lot of fun. Definitely check out those movies. Steve Martin's great in them, and obviously Kieran Culkin's having a moment right now. He's been for the last few years. It's funny to see him as a child in that movie. But what are the top 5 movies that revolve around the holiday? I did make a list for this in no particular order. The one that's probably most famous is When Harry Met Sally. That's where the big monologue happens on New Year's Eve. And I feel like that's kind of people's go-to movie when it comes to New Year's Eve. Obviously, When Harry Met Sally is probably Meg Ryan and Billy Crystal's most famous film. It's really rejuvenated the rom-com. A lot of people kind of reference that as one of the first rom-coms. Rom-coms existed way before that. I just feel like they kind of captured that rom-com formula that we all know and some people love. I'm not a huge fan of that formula. Once you've seen it a million times, and they always go back to the same exact formula. It's so cliched, but it works still really well in When Harry Met Sally, and of course that revolves a little bit around the New Year's holiday. And then another one I have is The Shining, which a lot of people might not think of as a New Year's movie either, but of course that ballroom, whenever they're walking through that, it's one of my favorite scenes in the movie, in how everybody's talking quiet, the ball's going on, and Jack is just walking up to the bar. Like, just a quiet little scene like that is one of my favorite scenes in The Shining, and you know what? Kind of has a New Year's feel to it. Another one, this one actually takes place on New Year's Eve. Ghostbusters 2, at least the third act of it takes place on New Year's Eve. So Ghostbusters 2 is kind of a New Year's movie. We actually reviewed that here on the channel back in, I want to say in the summer. Me and David, a.k.a. Shamrock Balls, we talked about Ghostbusters 2 and kind of talked about how it is a New Year's movie. And it's actually, I think, a New Year's tradition for him to watch that movie on that holiday. So I guess it's pretty fun to watch Ghostbusters 2. Ghostbusters 2 gets a bad rap just because it's basically not Ghostbusters, but it's still a very enjoyable film. And one that's a new addition to the New Year's rotation would be The Substance, one of the best films of 2024. A big thing in the third act is that one character is going to be hosting a New Year's event. They want her to host it. I'm not going to tell you who, because again, this is a really new movie, and it is one of the best films of 2024. So definitely check that one out. And last on the list is Strange Days, directed by Catherine Bigelow, starring Angela Bassett and Ralph Fiennes. This actually takes place in the last 2 days of 1999. The movie didn't come out in 1999, but this was obviously a big thing in the 1990s. People were worried about Y2K. They felt like the end of the 1900s, that was going to be the end of the world. We just actually had a movie come out called Y2K, which is a comedy kind of really diving into this kind of theory that we had going on. We all thought it was going to end, and this movie's kind of taken a different approach to it, and also kind of got some things right, especially when it comes to virtual reality. It's diving into, selling like fantasies to people like on the black market. And then it kind of turns into a noir film. This movie is beautiful, and the third act takes place like kind of as like the balls drop. And I actually thought they captured that well. One thing here in New York is we always watch the ball drop. That's the countdown to midnight to the new year. And I thought they actually captured that really well in this movie. Now, I would never go near New York City on New Year's Eve. I think those people are absolute psychopaths. Like, I don't know how you could possibly enjoy that. That just seems like a nightmare, like to be stuck in that crowd. I guess it's like a one and done kind of thing for people. But if you're from New York, for the most part, you just stay away from that. So Strange Days is another one you should definitely watch on New Year's Eve. That was a great question, Lorenzo. I really do appreciate that one, buddy. Next question from our channel director, Mr. Smelly Potato. And he said, what are some movies other people talk about but you love, and you can't understand why they feel that way? For me, I love Daredevil movie with Ben Affleck, and Expendables 2 is one of my favorites, but a lot of people don't like those movies. I'll be completely honest with you, Mr. Smelly Potato, I am not a fan of the Expendables movies. Never really could get into them. They just felt too generic. I absolutely get the appeal, and those are movies that really are directed right at me. A fan of those 1980s action movies, you know, bringing in everybody, Stallone, Schwarzenegger, Bruce Willis, Dolph Lundgren, even bringing in modern day action stars like Jason Statham. Those movies just never really worked for me. But hey, I can really respect that you really enjoy them. And as far as 2003's Daredevil goes with Ben Affleck, I've seen that movie a ton of times just because my dad's a huge fan of the movie. Still talks about that movie to this very day. One of the rare movies, like me, my dad, or my brother, we went and saw that, and he just loved the movie. So I always felt like the movie's fine. You know, I don't hate that movie. I never was one of those people that was like, it's one of the worst superhero movies ever. I'm like, have you seen Batman or Robin? At least they were trying things with it. And, you know, they got a spin-off in Elektra. And there's also at least somewhat of an audience out there because a lot of people were hoping in Deadpool and Wolverine that one of the characters that would pop up would be Ben Affleck's Daredevil. A lot like Chris Evans, you know, he has multiple superhero characters that he's played. So it would be cool to actually see Ben Affleck pop up in that movie. Didn't happen, but hey, that's a card that's in their deck. Maybe they do that sometime down the line. But what about me? I would say that the big one that I love, and I've never understood the hate for it. Now, comedy is very subjective. Films in general are very subjective, but comedy films, I would say that those are probably the most subjective, even more than horror, just because everybody has a different sense of humor. And for me, I've always felt like I have a very childlike sense of humor, very much immature, you know, like there's that British dry humor out there that I enjoy as well, but I've always been somebody, you know, if it's the stupider it is, there's a good chance I'm going to laugh at it. And a good example of that is Anchorman. Anchorman is one of the greatest comedies of all time. So, of course, I was anticipating the sequel. Some people said it was too little too late. I felt like, you know, it wasn't as bad as like Dumb and Dumber 2. I don't think even 10 years had passed. I thought it was a good follow-up. They kind of hinted at it at the end of the original Anchorman. And now, of course, we're in the 1980s. So, of course, that's going to work for me right out of the gate. And yes, I think Anchorman 2 is a fantastic comedy, a great follow-up to Anchorman. Is it as good as Anchorman? No, it's never going to be as good as Anchorman, which is one of the greatest comedies ever. But Anchorman 2, some of those jokes in that movie will just have you dying and laughing on the floor. I get it. They're very stupid. The characters themselves are very over the top. And in the third act, it just gets a little bit ridiculous and stupid. And I can understand that. You could just say it's a much more enhanced version of the first film. I get that too, but there are people out there who love Home Alone 2. Home Alone 2 is just Home Alone turned up to 10. You know, instead of it being a house, he's got the entire New York City. I would say, you know, Anchorman 2 is just like that. You know, maybe the jokes were a little bit more grounded, but they're still over the top in the first movie. It's just in the second movie, they're really, really ridiculously over the top. But man, I'd be lying if I said I haven't watched that movie over 5 times and cracked up each and every single time. Just don't watch the alternate version. It's very similar to the first Anchorman. Like, I appreciate what they were doing just because there's so much ad-libbing. I just think the original classic theatrical cut is the best version of that film. And then the other one, I've mentioned this here before, it's another comedy. I really hate Daddy's Home, but the sequel, Daddy's Home 2, I think is a much better movie, and I think a lot of that has to do with the Christmas tone of that movie. It is a Christmas film, and, you know, this time Mark Wahlberg and Will Ferrell, they're on the same side, and I kind of like them teaming up a little bit more than them being enemies in the first Daddy's Home movie. And again, bringing in John Lithgow and Mel Gibson, thought it was a perfect follow-up and just a much, much, much better movie, and it's one you can watch, you know, every couple of years. I wouldn't say it's an every-year Christmas movie, but still, people hated that movie, and I don't think it deserved that hate. So that was a good question, Mr. Smelly Potato. Thank you so much, buddy. And then next question's from Kevin Kruger, and he said, what are your favorite movies about depression? And this is always a tough subject to talk about, mainly because I actually do suffer from depression. I don't really like to talk about it too much just because that's how I've been my entire life and kind of how my family is when it comes to depression. We just aren't very open with our feelings. You know, you might see that in movies where people have a hard time talking to their father who clearly struggles from like the same stuff. You know, it's one of those things. And especially being a man, it's very hard. I'm one of those people that definitely got struck by that, where it's like hard for me to show emotion. I don't want to be that person, but it is pretty tough for me. And really, my depression is caused by anxiety. I have a horrible, horrible anxiety disorder that I'm always working on. And I've had it since childhood. It's something that just I have to live with. I have to work through it. You know, every day I have to work through that. Again, I'm just not somebody who's like really big on talking about it. But I feel like when I get questions like this, I feel compelled to let you guys know that, yeah, I'm somebody who does struggle with these mental issues, even if it's something I don't really like show here on camera. It's just something that I have to deal with in my day-to-day life. And I know that there's a lot of people like myself who also have to deal with it. And, you know, we try and cover it up with a smile. And I know for me personally, like one personality flaw that I have is that I will cover it up with jokes. And that means I'll make jokes at like inappropriate times. Drives my wife nuts. And it's something I clearly got from my father because he does the same exact thing. And, you know, it's just like, when things are painful, we just kind of have a defense mechanism built in, and it's, you know, to turn to comedy. It's just that comedy isn't always appropriate, guys, and I've learned that throughout my entire life. And will I change? Probably not. I think I should. Maybe I should, you know, address my issues a little bit more, but here we are, and I am who I am. But there have been some great films that I think have depicted depression really well, and I made a list for you guys. The first one I have up is 2015's End of Tour. And End of Tour stars Jason Segel and Jesse Eisenberg, and this tells a story of David Wallace Foster during one of his tours. Jesse Eisenberg's character of David Litsky, and then the book he actually wrote is what this movie's based on. It's about a time when he was going around on a tour for David Foster Wallace, who was a big-time writer in the 1990s, and he suffered from depression. And that's the character that Jason Segel plays in this movie. A character who actually succumbed to his depression and eventually committed suicide at a very young age. I thought this movie captured depression very well. The way Jason Segel's character is, who is very self-aware of his issues. And he knows that he's an introvert and he has to deal with these issues head on. And he could easily fall right back into the same traps he always falls into, you know, for comfort. That's the thing about depression, is it's very easy to turn to certain things, like for a lot of people, drugs or alcohol or even food. We've seen this depicted in a lot of other movies like The Whale, where you're just trying to heal up your pain. And for David Foster Wallace, a big thing is, you know, watching TV. He knows that he could fall right back into that trap because it's comforting to, you know, I know this for myself being a huge film fan, you know, to go jump into somebody else's life and watch a movie and try and forget about it. It's an escape. You're trying to forget about the world out there. And I thought this movie just captured that perfectly. And then, of course, knowing the outcome of that character, you know, it's very interesting to see how his day-to-day life was. Very soft-spoken man, very friendly, easy to get along with, but of course he does have these character flaws in him that he has to deal with every single day too, and I thought the movie just captured that perfectly. Next up, I got The Perks of Being a Wallflower. Now, this is a coming-of-age movie, so of course there's some teenage angst in there, but the lead character in this movie is definitely dealing with his own depression, something that actually led to him being in a hospital. And there's a good reason for it, and it's brought up in the third act of this movie. I won't spoil it here for you guys. But I thought the way that they captured that, you know, it's something that a lot of us might not even see coming. You might not see this in a person. You might not expect a person to be feeling this way. It's not the kind of thing that just comes out. And then when it happens, you're surprised by it. But the character himself, once you realize how it happened and what caused it, you can completely understand that character. And, you know, we bury things down deep, but eventually that stuff will boil to the surface if you don't address it head on. I think this movie captures it perfectly. I also think this is one of the better coming-of-age movies ever made. It's one of my personal favorites all time, and it's just one you should just check out in general, and I think it deals with depression in a great way. Next up, I got Lon von Trier's Melancholia, and this is dealing with the world ending. This movie stars Kirsten Dunst, and one of my favorite performances by her. Lars von Trier is not a director for everyone. I mean, if you've seen Antichrist, you know that. But I think he's made some fantastic films, some beautiful films like Breaking the Waves. But I actually think Melancholia is his best film. Two sisters in this movie. The world's about to end. I believe it's a meteor is just coming for Earth, and there's nothing that anyone can do. Kiefer Sutherland already knew this was happening. He tries to hide it. His wife, who is Kirsten Dunst's sister, you know, seems like she has the whole world going for her before this event's about to happen. Like, everything is working out for her, whereas Kirsten Dunst's character is a very, very depressed character, and it's very clear. They make it very obvious to us before the world's about to end. Now, as the world is about to end and everybody knows it, Kirsten Dunst's character, She starts to become a lot happier. A very different person than when the world wasn't ending. Whereas her sister now is extremely depressed and is a very different person, showing us that people deal with certain things in different ways. You know, when the world's ending, it's like, okay, Kirsten Dunst's character has accepted her fate. She's like, okay, there's nothing I can do. Might as well embrace it, enjoy it, and try and live out my last days in the happiest ways I can. Whereas her sister cannot accept that, believes like this should not be happening to her, and just cannot come to terms with it. Also showing that the foundations of their lives are also very fragile, and it might be more of a facade for Kirsten Dunst's sister's character compared to Kirsten Dunst, who is, at least showing the kind of person she is. It's not fake, and I think the movie is very well directed. A movie like this, with a lot of special effects, could be a very different movie. This is very much a character study, a very dialogue-heavy movie, but it's definitely one I recommend. This is kind of a good movie to start with Lars von Trier, I would say, before you get into some of the stuff that gets really dark. But even though this movie is dealing with a dark subject, I actually think it's kind of beautiful, and I definitely can recommend Melancholia. Next up, I got Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and this movie is absolutely beautiful, written by Charlie Kaufman, who's, depression's a big deal in a lot of Charlie Kaufman movies, even in movies like Being John Malkovich. It's a very serious subject for him. I think one of his best films that he's ever directed is Synecdoche in New York, starring Philip Seymour Hoffman. That's a great dive, a great character study I can highly recommend. Maybe I'll do a 4K Blu-ray review here on the channel for that. But Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is directed by Spike Jonze, stars Jim Carrey and Kate Winslet. One of my favorite movies ever. It takes place on Long Island. What a great concept. If you've been in a relationship before, a failing relationship can be extremely painful. And what do you do when a breakup is extremely tough? What if you erase the other person? And what if that invention exists? So this is kind of a sci-fi movie as well, despite it also being a very, very serious drama and a little bit funny. That's the thing with Charlie Kaufman. There'll be some dark humor in there as well. Well, Kate Winslet does that. She has to erase Joel, played by Jim Carrey in this movie. And it's so painful because now she doesn't recognize him, but he still has these memories, and he decides to, I'm going to do it the same. I'm going to erase my memory as well. And one of the most painful things in this movie, and we all, if you've had pets, have gone through this, when a pet passes away, you want to, that pain is so bad. I've always felt like the loss of a pet is equal to losing a human being. And for a lot of people who don't have kids, those are our kids. And when one of them passes away, it hurts just as much as losing any other human being. And, it doesn't get treated the same. It's also not, being a pet parent is not the same as being a regular parent. And I get that. But for a lot of people out there, the pets mean so much to them. And for a person in this movie, you could see that they want to erase the memory of that pet so that they don't have that pain anymore. And you got to bring something to the doctor's office to help. And she's got a box full of the toys and the bowl and the collar. And that hurts me. I feel that every single time. But Joel's trying to erase the memory of Kate Winslet as well. And then he's trying to also just hold on to the memories. He feels like he made a mistake. And then the way this movie ends, with, should I spoil it? I won't spoil it how it ends, but it ends on a very realistic note that I really appreciate. I think it's a fantastic ending to this film. And of course, the depression of this movie, I think, is very well done. The depression of being in a relationship, and a failing relationship at that. I think Kirsten Dunst is actually in this movie, but I think that Kate Winslet nails it, and I think that Jim Carrey nails it. This is by far his best dramatic performance. And the last one I got is Manchester by the Sea, which is probably the most depressing movie that I've ever seen. Casey Atwood definitely earned his Academy Award for this movie. But man, the pain that this guy is feeling. And then when you find out why he's like this and why he doesn't want to let anybody in his life and he's just going through the motions every single day, you're like, yeah, I get that. There is no coming back from that. And the movie kind of hammers that home when it comes to depression. Is unfortunately, some things you can't come back from. You just have to learn to live with it, and there will always be this hole, no matter what. A hole that can't be filled with religion or anything. There is no way to fill this hole. It's an empty space in me, and that's it. Unfortunately, these things do happen, and it's a part of life, but it's an absolutely horrible part of life. And Manchester by the Sea, I think, captures that perfectly. Fantastic film, but I don't think it's a rewatchable, even though the rewatchables did do a podcast on it. I just don't think that this movie is very rewatchable. But that was a great question, Kevin. Thank you so much, buddy. And the next question is from our buddy Stuart George, and he said, favorite film version of A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Mine's the 50s version with Alistair Sim. It's a dark, haunting, eerie, and wonderful. Have a fantastic Christmas, John, mate. And thank you so much, Stuart. And I hope you had a great Christmas as well. And actually, Stuart George over on his YouTube channel put out a video that I actually watched on Christmas Eve. It was the first video I watched that day, and it was his video on the top 10 versions of A Christmas Carol. It was a fantastic video. I highly recommend you guys go check that out. And as he brought up, his favorite version is the 1950s version of A Christmas Carol, which is really good. He also mentioned that his dad's favorite version is the 1984 version, starring George C. Scott. I love that version. That is not my favorite, but that is definitely one of my favorites. I really do enjoy that one. So your dad clearly has some very good taste. You said that it wasn't one of your favorites, though, which is mine, and that is Scrooge from 1988, I believe. Yeah, 1988, starring Bill Murray. You know, Bill Murray's big comeback after taking a little break, you know. Fame was a little bit too much, and then he came back, and of course, they had to market it as him playing with ghosts again. He plays the Scrooge character, even though they are making a fictionalized version of Scrooge in this movie. Even though he's not called Ebenezer Scrooge in this one, he's clearly Scrooge. He's going to get visited by the three ghosts, and this, of course, has that great 80s tone to it. It's got the great Danny Elfman score, so it's kind of a little bit of a horror film. Not a full-blown horror film, but it's got that haunting score in this. You know, it's kind of a dark fantasy film, and I think it works perfectly. Everybody who plays the ghosts in this movie, including Buster Poindexter, perfect casting there. Bill Murray, this is a Bill Murray character arc you've seen a million times. An asshole needs to learn his lesson, and of course he will. But then the way they end the movie with him just this beautiful monologue right into the end credits, it is my favorite version of A Christmas Carol. Followed up closely by the Robert Zemeckis version starring Jim Carrey. I love that one. I thought they improved the animation from Polar Express. And I still really enjoy that one. I hope that gets a 4K Blu-ray release sometime down the line. The podium one, number 3 for me, would be that 1984 one. But I also really do also enjoy A Muppet Christmas Carol. How could you not? Like you said in your video, Stuart, it's just a lot of fun, that version. So that's my favorite version of A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. They'll keep making these. And I definitely say, hey, go check out Stuart George's video. I think you guys will really enjoy it. That was a great question, buddy. I really do appreciate it. Next question from Rogue1677. He said, okay, what 2025 Criterion film do you hope comes to 4K possibly? And he said, worst Christmas movie you've seen, and rank all the Saw films and their unrated versions since I've been rewatching them for Christmas, and I'll take you down too. Laugh out loud. Have a Merry Christmas, John. Merry Christmas, Rogue One. And I'll answer the first question first. So the Criterion movie that I would love to come to 4K Blu-ray is Bill Duke's Deep Cover, starring Lawrence Fishburne and Jeff Goldblum. That is actually one of my favorite noir films of all time. One of my favorite films of the 1990s. It was a film I actually found later in my life. Actually, I didn't find it until that Criterion Blu-ray came out. And that Criterion Blu-ray is fantastic. So if they improve on that Blu-ray with the 4K Blu-ray, I would absolutely love that. So I would hope that comes to 4K Blu-ray 2025. Now, the worst Christmas movie I've seen, that's really tough. I mean, there's been a lot. I'm going to actually go with the Santa Claus 3. The Santa Claus 1 is a classic, one of my favorites all time. Santa Claus 2 is really good. The third one, though, even though I think that's the one with Martin Short, he's really funny in it. It's just, it's not as memorable as the other two, and unfortunately kind of feels a little bit like a cash grab. Haven't seen the Disney Plus series. I can't imagine it's as good as the original Santa Claus. But again, 2 is a good follow-up, 3 is horrible. Now, as far as ranking the Saw movies, I'm going to go a little fast through this because I haven't rewatched them in a long time. So off the top of my head, I'm going to go at number 1, the original Saw movie. That is by far the best one. Has a great twist ending. I saw that in theaters the weekend it came out. There was a lot of hype around that movie. This is a time like before, like the internet was still early on, but a lot of the reviews were pretty good and people were talking about it. I remember just the commercials for it, and you know, no one had really like kind of snuck up on all of us. So we went and saw it and had this huge twist ending, which kind of became the trademark of the franchises. Every one of them had to end on a twist ending, and they got ridiculously out of hand after this. So then, you know, the first one was great. They came out every single year for a long time, and honestly, for me, they kind of go in order, so it's like Saw 1 and 2 are by far my favorites. Then the third one is the most recent Saw film, Saw X or Saw 10. That one I thought was a great one, so that would go in at number 3. Then number 4 would be Spiral, which I think it still counts in the Saw franchise since it comes from the book of Saw. I thought Spiral was great. I really enjoyed that movie. People seem to have forgotten about it. Thought it was a good follow-up, even though it's kind of a spin-off. It's not exactly in the same exact, you know, Saw franchise, but I thought it was a good follow-up, so I really did enjoy that movie. Then we circle back and we go to Saw 3, Saw 4, Saw 5. Then I'll pop in Jigsaw here because Jigsaw is pretty good. Then Saw 6, you know, like when they had the Hoffman storyline going, I was intrigued the first time we went through it, but then after that on rewatch, you're just like, these movies are pretty fucking bad. And like, honestly, after Saw 4, 5, 6, Saw 3D, those movies are just fucking horrible. I really don't like those movies at all on rewatch. And then I think, and Saw 3D is the worst of them. Has a good twist ending, which does circle back for the franchise, but not really a great movie. So I would have to say Saw 3D is by far the worst of them. You know, I would say that really the only movies that you should really go back and rewatch are Saw 1, 2, and Jigsaw, and then maybe Spiral, because I do like it. Then after that, they're just really bad, in my opinion. Like Saw 3 and Saw 4, like I like how they're intertwined with each other, but after a certain point, these just got ridiculous. And like I said, they just were really counting on those twist endings, and the acting just gets really bad. This was like the torture porn era, and this is kind of the part of the 2000s that I enjoyed in the moment, but I don't really look back on too fondly. Like, I did go see every single Saw movie every single year. I was into them, but after going back on rewatch, these do not hold up. If a 4K collection ever comes out, like, I already have them all. And I have the ones that have come out on 4K, but like every year I'll just really go back and watch the original Saw and get those nostalgic feelings, and 2's a good follow-up. But for the most part, this franchise, it should be left where it was in the 2000s, and thankfully somehow Saw X was a really good film, and it might actually be the best film in the franchise from a screenplay standpoint. But you know, the first 2 films were really special for me nostalgic wise, so even though Saw X might be the best structured film in the franchise, you know, I can't put it at number 1 just yet. So that's a good question, Rogue One. Thank you so much, buddy. And the next question is from Uncle Charlie. He said, a question for next week. Do you think there should be a Hall of Fame for actors like they do in sports? Well, I mean, they kind of have this because they have the Academy Awards, like, I don't know what they call it, like the Academy Awards Museum in Los Angeles. I'm pretty sure that's open right now. So, you know, when they kind of win an Academy Award, that's essentially like being inducted into the Hall of Fame. I mean, you kind of can look at it as like an MVP award. But I would like that. I would definitely like an official like Hall of Fame, like a Lifetime Achievement Award. Again, they kind of hand these out already. So it's kind of tough, but I would definitely like to see that. I would love to see like somebody being like, you're the greatest actor ever. Like, we're going to induct you into the Hall of Fame. Maybe even have like the NFL where they have the heads and what, you know, the heads out there, like the gold heads. Would love to see that. NASCAR even has a Hall of Fame now, which I really do love because I always felt like NASCAR deserved the Hall of Fame. WWE has a Hall of Fame, so I would like to see that, but I feel like with the amount of award shows they have each year just to pat themselves on the back, do they really need more? You know, obviously if they did it, I'd be there just because I'm kind of a shill when it comes to like awards. Like, I don't know why. I always just like fall back into getting excited for the Academy Awards. It's kind of like, you know, it's just for us fans of movies, it is always fun to like just hear the actors talk, even though you kind of know in the back of your head it's all bullshit. It's just that, I don't know, as film fans, you like it. It's like the extras, the behind-the-scenes interviews. Like, you get wrapped up in it, but sometimes you're like, this isn't fucking true. But either way, or I do kind of feel like we do have them already, so even if it ever came, I would like it. I just already feel like it's already kind of exists in its own way. But that's a great question, Uncle Charlie. Thank you so much, buddy. The next question is from Will, and he said, top 5 horror movies that you would think would have come to 4K Blu-ray by now. His list includes The Fly. Disney might never release this. The Descent from 2005. The Final Destination franchise. 28 Days Later, 2002. Would look amazing in 4K, and The Conjuring from 2013. So I made a list for this as well, but you really hit on some of the big ones. I think number 1 would definitely be The Fly. A lot of people love Jeff Goldblum's The Fly, directed by David Cronenberg, also starring Gina Davis. Fantastic 1980s body horror film. Arguably David Cronenberg's best film. I would probably put it at number 2 behind Dead Ringers because I love Jeremy Irons' performance in that movie. It's amazing. He won an Academy Award for Reversal of Fortune, which is 100% a one and done for me. Great acting, but I'm never going to go back to that. But Dead Ringers, fantastic film. He's amazing in it. Then I also agree with you with The Conjuring. That movie started this huge blockbuster franchise. There are movies in the Conjuring universe that have 4K Blu-ray releases, but you don't have the original, and by far still the best one in the franchise, directed by James Wan, who also directed Saw. How do you not have the original Conjuring? I mean, this is the big one, and it's still the best one. That drives me nuts. 28 Days Later and 28 Weeks Later. I do feel like we will get these this year with the sequel coming out 28 years later this year. I think they're going to be coming to 4K Blu-ray, so I fully expect that this year. So for people who are still selling their 28 Days Later and 28 Weeks Later Blu-rays that have been out of print, you know, you might want to sell them now because they're not going to be worth shit when those 4K Blu-rays come. In the Mouth of Madness, that's huge. I don't know how that hasn't come. They like almost skipped right over it. Like, we're going to be getting Ghosts of Mars on 4K Blu-ray, and we've already gotten Village of the Damned on 4K Blu-ray. Like, how do we get the Village of the Damned on 4K Blu-ray, Ghosts of Mars on 4K Blu-ray? I like vampires, but In the Mouth of Madness is by far John Carpenter's most underrated film. That needs a 4K Blu-ray release. Don't know how it hasn't happened yet. And then the last one is Day of the Dead. Like, we got Dawn of the Dead, Night of the Living Dead. Like, Day of the Dead might not be as popular as those other two, but it's definitely at number 3 as far as popularity goes. And it's a fantastic film. I thought maybe after it popping up in, what was it, Stranger Things season 2 or 3? One of them. No, Stranger Things season 3. I thought it would have given a resurgence to that film as far as getting a 4K Blu-ray release. And, you know, it being already having a Scream Factory Blu-ray release, I thought, okay, that's probably going to get an upgrade at some point, but it still hasn't. Let's hope it comes in 2025. That was a great question, Will. Thank you so much, buddy. Next question from Bill Whistler. He said, what are your thoughts on the movie Red Rooms? He said 2023. Now, it's funny because Red Rooms, I just watched this a couple weeks ago in preparation of my top 10 films of 2024 list. I heard it was great. I think it was Adam Nayland on the Ring Your podcast, The Big Picture. He was on there. He's from Canada, and he put this in his number 1 film of 2024. So I think it was just released officially, like wide release in 2024. So I'm still counting it as a 2024 film. But anyway, Red Rooms is a French-Canadian film directed by Pascal Plante, who also wrote the movie and also edited the movie. It's very well edited. It's also very beautiful to look at. The movie stars Juliette Gneripi. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong. It's a French name. This movie is a French-Canadian film, so the whole movie, for the most part, is spoken in French with some English dialogue in there, but it's mostly a French film. This movie was extremely intriguing. It is very well written. The screenplay is amazing. It really dives into our modern-day culture. This is a great thriller movie. I don't want to spoil too much about it, so I'm going to try and give you guys as little information as I possibly can, but still give this movie as much praise as I can, because some of the monologues in this film, like the first 15 minutes of this movie, takes place in a courtroom, and it's just them delivering their opening statements, and it's phenomenal. It's gripping, explaining what they believe a serial killer did. A serial killer who killed 3 people, and he shot this on film. 3 people, by the way, who were kids, all under the age of 60. I think it was 16, 14, and 13. And he filmed them, and he was selling it on the dark web for a lot of money. And it got me thinking, is this stuff real? Because they really dive into what the dark web is. I've never looked into it, but if they're selling like shit like this, or if this shit is like coming sometime down the line, that is absolutely insane. And this movie, you know, it's really dark and really hard to see, and it also dives into like the fandom of some of these people who get behind these serial killers or believe they didn't do it, or diving into like artificial intelligence and the technology that's there in Bitcoin, and just how we dive into how we're just so controlled by technology nowadays, and how we don't have that same human interaction like we used to, and what people use the internet for now, whether it be for the dark web or to make money through like online poker. I really thought this movie was just absolutely fascinating. There's a scene where a character in this movie dresses up in an outfit and like just shows it off in a courtroom. And my God, my heart was racing the entire time I was watching it. I know that it might seem like I'm not giving a lot of information about what this movie is, and that is purposeful, because I really think you should go into this movie blind. And if you guys aren't into subtitles, I think this is one you should make an exception for. Like I said, one of my favorite movies of 2024, and I can highly recommend Red Room. So that was a great question, Bill. Thank you so much. And the next one's from Kylie Tinkle, who said, do you ever watch Christmas movies in months other than November and December? Certain movies I will, but not full-blown Christmas movies. Like, I love Christmas Vacation, but that still has to be watched in December. Like that and Scrooge, I could watch around, any month, but I still won't, so it doesn't really happen. But movies like Lethal Weapon and Batman Returns, which aren't necessarily straightforward Christmas movies, especially Lethal Weapon, it's just during Christmas time, and Shane Black just loves to do things like that in his movies, and he wrote Lethal Weapon. But look at Iron Man 3, look at The Nice Guys, it's around Christmas time. He just always has his movies set during Christmas time, even though they're not necessarily Christmas movies, so I could always watch Lethal Weapon any time of the year. And that was a great question, Kylie. Thank you so much. And the next question is from Amanda, and she said, what is your favorite Christmas memory? I have some great Christmas memories, but my favorite is definitely 2001. My parents are divorced, and if you're fortunate enough, you have 2 Christmases when your parents are divorced. And I was very fortunate, and I was very lucky as a kid that I got Christmas at my mom's. And then after I was done opening presents there, I went to my dad's. Now, this particular Christmas in 2001, I mean, I hit the jackpot that year. I got my PlayStation 2. I got Grand Theft Auto 3. I got my first DVD ever, which was the movie Driven, starring Sylvester Stallone, which is ridiculous to hear. But yes, my mom knew I was a big NASCAR fan, so she thought I'll get him a NASCAR movie. Why not Days of Thunder? God forbid she got me that, even though she knew I was a fan of it. My mother did this all the time. I told you guys the Speed 2 story. I asked for Titanic on VHS. My mother got me Speed 2 Cruise Control. He must like boats. Like, this is just things that my mom thought absolutely ridiculous. So, you know, she got me Driven because I'm a NASCAR fan. Driven is a fucking horrible movie. My God, but had that Snap DVD case back in the day. So I got that at my mom's house. Then I went to my dad's house, and he got me and my brother a go-kart. Now, not a really nice go-kart, but my dad worked at a plant nursery, and he was able to like go there like on Sundays when it was closed, and we could just drive this go-kart all around the yard. And it was amazing. It was one of my favorite gifts ever. It's still one of my fondest Christmas. It is my fondest Christmas memory. So I got spoiled that year in 2001, and I'll never forget 2001's Christmas. You know, some of them you forget right away, but for me, that one absolutely stands out. So thank you so much, Amanda. And the next one's from Tom Cruise's burner account, and he said, "Have you ever met someone in real life that has a bigger collection and knowledge of film in general than you?" So yes and no. I have never met somebody in my real life where, like, I don't know if you mean like in my day-to-day life. Like, I've met people on YouTube who have fantastic film knowledge that I've been on shows with that I can't say I have more film knowledge than them. Maybe more film knowledge in a certain genre, but like, there's plenty of great people who know horror way more than me. Like, I might know more in like the drama section, but in the horror section, there's a lot more people on YouTube who I've interacted with who are definitely more knowledgeable when it comes to horror than I am. Now, in real life, no, I've never met somebody with more film knowledge than me. I don't really get to talk movies with too many people out there, honestly, in my day-to-day life. You know, that's what the great thing, and it's kind of a blessing with YouTube, is I found so many other people who are into the same thing as me, whether it be film or collecting physical media. I got really lucky with that because, you know, this is a very niche thing, whether we act like it is or not. You know, we got to find each other, because in my real life, you know, I can find more people who enjoy sports, which is good that I enjoy sports as well, or wrestling, but who don't really like movies or just go to like 3 or 4 movies a year. The big ones like Wicked or Mufasa or Moana, you know, the big Disney movies, that's the one. Or when the MCU puts a movie out, or even the DCEU, like, people will get excited for that, but they're not like me going out every single week and going to see the new Yorgos Lanthimos movie. You know, that's just not happening in my regular day-to-day life. So to find somebody who has similar film knowledge to me, it's not really going to happen. The closest is my cousin Matt, who started this YouTube channel with me, and he definitely has a bigger collection than me. Because not only does Matt collect movies, and, you know, I might have more movies than him at this point just because he collects other things, but this guy also collects video games. He collects toys. Like, he's an insane collector. He's just a collector at heart. Like, for me, you guys have heard me say it here a million times, the movie comes first. Like, as much as I am a movie collector, I'm not going to buy something, even though I did say that Kickboxer I bought for the art, but for the most part, I will not buy a movie on 4K Blu-ray unless I enjoy that movie. But for Matt, if something looks nice, he'll buy it, or he has to have the complete collection of a film franchise. Like, for me, if I don't like a movie, I'm not buying it on 4K Blu-ray. It's just not going to happen. I have Batman 89, Batman Returns, and Batman Forever on 4K Blu-ray. I didn't buy the complete set because I already own Batman and Robin on Blu-ray and that complete set, and I don't need Batman and Robin on 4K Blu-ray tainting my 4K collection. So for me, it's a little bit different, but Matt definitely has a bigger collection than me. There's videos on this channel where you could look at least his Xbox 360 video game collection, and you can look at his entire movie collection up to that point, I believe in 2022. Very old videos. We weren't that good yet, so I warn you as far as the quality goes. But if you want to see, like, at least get a glance at what his collection is like, because as far as everything goes, it blows mine out of the water. I just might beat him in movies, but his collection is fucking fantastic. So that was also a great question, Tom Cruise's burner account. Thank you so much, buddy. And then, what's your favorite dad joke is what Timmy asked me. And, you know, I was trying to think of a good one. Like, my dad loves dad jokes, but as far as dad jokes, so I'm not somebody who, like, my comedy goes, I'm just kind of off the cuff. I'm, like, really quick-witted, but I'm not somebody who really tells dad jokes. But one that I always enjoyed from my dad, and he used and abused this, was, you know, I wasn't born at night, I may have been born at night, John, but I wasn't born last night. He would always throw that in, like, even while he was yelling at me. Like I said, from my dad, like, he might have been completely pissed off at me, but he still has to make jokes while he's doing it. It's just kind of a defense mechanism for us, and that's what he did there. So I always thought that one was pretty funny, and then, of course, you find out, like, every dad uses that joke. It's very, very common. I'll even find myself sometimes using that joke by accident, just because, you know, it's so ingrained in my memory. And then the next question is from Frank's ex-wife, and he said, for today's show, what is your opinion of Megan Fox as an actor? Well, earlier this year, I did a review for Jennifer's Body, and I thought Megan Fox was perfectly cast in that movie. They're not asking her to do too much, and that's the thing. Megan Fox is never going to be an Academy Award-winning actress. Well, at least from what I can tell. You never know, though. Sometime down the line, she might have, like, a career resurgence or something. So we'll have to wait and see. But for the most part, you know, she's always just been a very pretty girl. That's what most people think of when they think of Megan Fox. Unfortunately, she does not necessarily deserve that. But she, you know, she's never been a great actress. You know, when you watch her in the Transformers movies, she's very passable. But then you watch Jennifer's Body, you're like, okay, she can act when she's in the right role. And I would have liked to she doesn't really act anymore as far as I know. I think she just became a full-time mother, which is good. That, you know, if that's what she wants to do, she's allowed to live her life. She doesn't have to be more than eye candy. Unfortunately, I do remember, like, when the Transformers movie came out, a lot of people were into her, and like her hanging over the Camaro. I'm not gonna sit here and lie and say that I was not impressed either. I would be lying to you guys, but you know, that's really, she kind of became a little bit of a piece of meat to a lot of people, which I'm sure she didn't appreciate, even though she kind of seemed like she was leaning into it. What can I say for sure, though? She definitely wanted to be taken seriously as an actor, just never thought she was the greatest actress overall. But that's a great question. Thank you so much. And then our last question for this week is again from Mr. Wolf Viking. Now, he asked me a bunch of top 10 lists to make, but I'm only going to do one this week just because we're kind of running short on time. And he said, I was going to ask you your favorite Dan Aykroyd movies or favorite Gene Hackman movies. And I got really excited to talk some Gene Hackman because Gene Hackman making a top 10 list is really hard. Gene Hackman is one of our great actors, came on the scene where people finally took notice of him in one of the greatest movies of the 1960s, Bonnie and Clyde. He has a small role in that, but it really put him on the map. And then it wasn't until The French Connection that people took notice, and he became one of our great actors. And all the way up until his final film, Welcome to Mooseport, also starring Ray Romano, which is crazy because that was one of the first Gene Hackman movies I ever saw, and that was one of his last movies just because of my age. And, you know, he's fine in that movie, I guess. I haven't seen it since it came out. But I made a list here, so some of his best movies aren't going to make the list just because he's been in so many great ones. And at number 10... I got Young Frankenstein. Now, this is more of a glorified cameo, but this is my favorite Mel Brooks movie. Gene Wilder is fantastic. As Dr. Frankenstein, he is perfectly cast. Now, in this movie, Gene Hackman plays a blind guy, and when Frankenstein's monster's out there roaming the streets, you know, he ends up there, and Gene Hackman's a lonely guy, and he's like, oh, I want to cook for you. Spills soup on him, and Peter Boyle's character of Frankenstein's monster here, or Frankenstein's monster, you know, he's like, I can't take this anymore. I don't care about hanging out with this guy anymore. He's so fucking clumsy. I just got to get the hell out of here. But Gene Hackman just he wants a friend. He's trying to do it. He's like, come on, you coming back? He's just so good in that movie, even though it's not a very big role. At number 9, I got him as Lex Luthor in the original Superman movie. Now, he pops up in 3 of the 4 of the movies. He is great as Lex Luthor. It's always hard to fill those shoes. Now, this is Gene Hackman kind of hamming it up a little bit, but hamming it up, Gene Hackman still works really well. Love him as Lex Luthor. At number 8, I got The Firm. Now, this is just a great 1990s thriller starring him and Tom Cruise. It's really Tom Cruise's movie, but Gene Hackman plays a great part as, you know, one of the guys working at the firm as his mentor. He does a great job in this movie, as Gene Hackman always does. You know, this is kind of him. It feels like him coasting, but him coasting is still really good. At number 7, I got The Royal Tenenbaums. This is one of his last movies, and from what I understand, Gene Hackman did not have a good time making this film, but he's so good in this movie as the patriarch of the Tenenbaum family. But, you know, he has no real interest of being in that family. It's not until, like, later in his life where he decides, you know what, I'm going to fake a heart attack and try and get along with my kids again, try and bring the whole family back together. Another great movie that deals with depression is this film, because the family itself is pretty fucked up. But overall, it's a great movie, and Gene Hackman, he's awesome in this movie, as he always is. At number 6, I got No Way Out. Not only is this a great Kevin Costner movie, but this is also a great Gene Hackman movie. He plays really our antagonist in this film. He's the guy who kills Sean Young's character. He's just a piece of shit womanizer who got in a really high place. and he's trying to find a guy to pin this on, while Kevin Costner is the character that Gene Hackman is looking for, but they don't even realize it. They're working together, and they don't even realize they're working against each other, and that's why it's such a great ticking clock type of movie. You got the computer buffering the entire time. All of this is just done so well. I absolutely love No Way Out. It is one of the best 1980s thrillers. I can highly recommend it. At number 5, I got The Birdcage, a very rare comedy performance from Gene Hackman. This time he's married to Diane Wiest. They're the parents of this girl who's going to be marrying the biological son of Robin Williams, who is a gay character in this movie, and his partner is played by Nathan Lane, also basically the kid's father. So the kid's got 2 fathers, and then he has a real life mother who's like out of the picture. Just a terrible mother in my opinion. But Robin Williams and Nathan Lane, they're worried about how Gene Hackman's going to feel about this, and his wife Diane Wiest, because he's actually a big-time, very right-wing Republican. So obviously he's not going to feel really good about his daughter marrying a guy who has 2 gay fathers. So of course they're kind of pretending that, it's just Robin Williams and someone else is going to play his wife. And then of course Nathan Lane gets really upset about this because he feels left out, because it's fucked up, just because we're gay, we have to feel a certain way, we have to act a certain way. That's kind of one thing about the son in this movie. It's like, you're asking a lot of your father to pretend to be someone he isn't. And Robin Williams and Nathan Lane, they're proud of who they are. They don't care that they're gay. But, they got to pretend just because they don't want to offend Gene Hackman. Diane Wiest would definitely be on board, but they don't want to offend Gene Hackman. But Gene Hackman is great. He has great comedic timing in this movie. One of my favorite lines in the movie is when he makes Diane Wiest cry. And he's like, "You've made me make your mother cry." Like, he's so funny. He's obviously playing this more straight-laced, but he's on board and he's great in it. And The Birdcage is fantastic if you haven't seen it. And number 4, I got Hoosiers, one of the greatest sports movies of all time. Very cliche, but it's still one of the greatest sports movies of all time. And this is the coach who rolls into town, and he's going to save basketball there. And he does a great job. Does a great job in this movie. Dennis Hopper is also fantastic. It is one of the best sports movies of all time. Probably the best basketball sports movie of all time. At number 3, I got Mississippi Burning. I want this movie on 4K. When is this coming? It was rumored and we haven't gotten it yet. This movie stars him and Willem Dafoe. These 2 FBI agents, and they're investigating this racist town in Mississippi where a killing took place, and of course they're getting so much resistance from the town. There's a lot more deep racism in there. Gene Hackman is great in this movie. I just love how he's dressed in this movie compared to how Willem Dafoe is dressed. Gene Hackman comes from this area, so he's wearing the short sleeve shirt with the tie, a regular just working class kind of guy, compared to like Willem Dafoe's like, really uptight guy. They have just great chemistry together. You probably wouldn't expect it, but they really do. Number 2, The French Connection. This one's directed by William Friedkin. This and The Exorcist are definitely William Friedkin's most popular films. This won the Best Picture. Gene Hackman is amazing as Popeye Doyle in this movie. A very hard character to like. Like I said, he's not a guy who likes himself, Popeye Doyle. This is very much the beginning of like the anti-hero. If Bonnie and Clyde really was the first movie to like break the code, this one really is a 1970s film. It's not beautiful to look at. It's got that like documentary style about it, but it's still one of the best films ever made. I love this movie. Popeye Doyle is one of those characters. You love the character. You love to hate the character just because, he's not a real nice guy. He might love the job, but that's really the only good thing about him, is that he's a pretty good cop. Even though he's a kind of a piece of shit, he's clearly an alcoholic. There's a reason why he's living alone in this dirty apartment. All he's really good at is this job, and even that, he's like floating the edge of being bad at it. So it's a great character, and The French Connection is a great film, really exploring deep themes that were just starting out in the early 1970s. And at number 1, I got Unforgiven, directed by Clint Eastwood. And if you guys haven't seen Juror number 2, it won't make my top 10 films of the year, but Clint Eastwood directed this movie, and of course Warner Brothers decided to bury this movie. You can watch it right now on Max. Fantastic film. I'd highly recommend it. I just watched this last week with my wife. It's definitely a really good movie. And again, asking some serious questions. And in this movie, Unforgiven has one of the greatest third acts in film history, and he plays Little Bill. And he is so good in this movie, Gene Hackman. Gives by far his best performance. I like everything with him and English Bob. It's all done so good. The way he's speaking, how arrogant he is. This guy, he gets to be the sheriff of this town, and he's just really on his high horse. He's building a house. He thinks so highly of himself. He's so fucking arrogant. Of course, he's going to get his comeuppance at the end of this movie, and well-deserved comeuppance he gets. What a great movie Unforgiven is. One of the best movies ever made. If you haven't seen Unforgiven, it is still my favorite Western of all time, and I've seen a lot of Westerns. Maybe not as much as Stuart George, but I've seen a lot of Westerns. And that was a great question, Mr. Wolf Viking. We'll answer some more of your top 10 questions next week. I hope you're still on YouTube. But anyway, Thank you guys all so much for sending in your questions for this week's Q&A show. I had a great time. This is always one of my favorite shows to do each week. It actually is my favorite show to do each and every single week. My voice is a little bit hoarse. I'm sorry about that. I'm a little bit out of the weather. Nothing serious, just a little bit congested. But hopefully that didn't take away from your enjoyment of the show. So I really do appreciate it. Leave your questions for next week's show in the comment section below, or look for the post early next week. And thank you guys for being here with me. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We also have channel memberships. So if you want to become a friend of the channel, a producer for the channel like John Doe Juggalo and Jed Eckert, you can do that. Or even a channel director like Frank from Frank's Media and Reviews and Mr. Smelly Potato. But if you got no money to throw away, guys, don't worry about it at all. We just hope you enjoyed the video. And if you did, get out in those streets, tell your friends about us, and then we'll be seeing you around.